Hello friends, today we have Professor Payal Nagpal, who teaches English in Janki Devi Memorial College, Delhi University, and she is a professor, very senior now, and she is an expert in the modern literature particularly. And today the lecture is on Gwendolyn Brooks, which is who's the American author, and she died only in 2000. And as Professor Payal Nagpal informed me before the lecture that Gwendolyn Brooks was born in 1917. And when I saw the two dates, I realized that she almost covered the whole century. And in the first century, and in the previous century, she was born when the war ended, the First World War ended, and she died, when the aftermath of the Second World War was visited by her, I think quite regularly, as will be borne out by the lecture that Professor Nagpal gives us. And another thing that is important, and which also Professor Payal Nagpal told me, is that Gwendolyn Brooks actually is an Afro-American poet, genius, sensibility, you might interpret in so many different ways, and she has a heritage peculiar to her. A heritage as a black woman, heritage also as a woman in those circumstances, and naturally the voice of poetry in her case is going to be distinct for that reason. So without much more to say, I would request Professor Payal Nagpal to give her points, her lecture, which is always very thought-provoking. So Professor Payal Nagpal, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. As you very aptly pointed out, and gave a wonderful start to this by saying that she covers the entire century, and yes, and there are of course in the course of one lecture it would be difficult to actually identify a lot of important transitions and moments in her poetry, but I think the changes in the century are very, very well reflected in her work, and from the perspective of an Afro-American writer. And interestingly, Gwendolyn Brooks was also the first Afro-American writer to win the Pulitzer Prize in 1950 for her book Annie Allen. And Brooks was born in Kansas, but she spent a major part of her life primarily in Chicago. And she comes in that sense from a tradition of huge oppression and slavery. If I may actually quote that, she was born to David Anderson Brooks, the Oklahoma bred son of a runaway slave and a house slave of mixed parentage, and Keziah Corinne, a former school teacher and aspiring concert pianist. So we can see that she's, there is this legacy in a sense of oppression, racial oppression that she is born into and also inherits. So and how her writing, this is a photograph of Gwendolyn Brooks. So how her writing actually takes us through these very difficult moments, and how her writing actually becomes a way of articulating her resistance to racial oppression. And of course, there is also the whole class issue at hand, and Brooks is always very conscious of that. So some of the books that she wrote, for instance, A Street in Bronzeville in 1945, then Annie Allen followed in 1949. She primarily wrote poetry, but also a novella titled Maud Martha. And to begin with, she worked with, in terms of publishers, the big publishers, but gradually she realized the importance of publishing with, in a sense, the publishers who were not mainstream. And she thought that it was important to actually do so. So the Third World Press published, her last volume in Montgomery and Other Poems, which was published posthumously in 2003. She was also the first a woman of color, a black woman, who was a consultant to what is called, in poetry, to the Library of Congress, which is also referred to as a position that is titled the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry. And she held that position for a good 32 years. She won the praise of poets like Langston Hughes. And so her primary contribution in that sense, of course, is to poetry, is to writing, but is also to the articulation of her own context and what she observes around her, what she sees around her. That is a very, very important, pivotal contribution that Gwendolyn Brooks makes. She also wrote 2 volumes. In 2 volumes, she wrote her autobiography and the poem that we'll begin with today is a poem from 1960. So this is a time period when she's already kind of, in a sense, established herself as a poet. And the title itself is very interesting, The Bean Eaters. And it reminds me pretty much of the famous painting, The Potato Eaters, to indicate that, this is a humble family with no money and, the entire family sitting around the table and having potatoes. And here, Gwendolyn Brooks, in a sense, brings forth the poverty and the oppression through the poem The Bean Eaters. If you look at the first couple of lines, they eat beans mostly, this old yellow pair. Dinner is a casual affair. So before we actually kind of move into a discussion and analysis of the Bean Eaters, I would request Professor Prakash to share his comments, even on the title, for instance, The Bean Eaters.
Actually, the details that you have given are all very significant. They are generally reflected in the poetry of spontaneity. She is, of course, talking about class conflict or class, distinction, but then that is expressed through the personal reference. And I was also struck particularly by the fact that she wrote, a longish autobiography. And in any case, poetry in the 20th century has been mostly autobiographical in the case of women, to say so. So far as Bean Eater is concerned, yes, when you talk about eating, when you talk about the daily diet, all these things, and there are many references you'll be telling about eating and all later. Then this is a kind of household atmosphere that she is. You use the word articulation, the context, and articulation means that she observes and then she puts the whole thing into words, and those words denote the very air, the very fragrance of living in the household, in the four walls, or in the larger restrictions of the society in which one lives. So I am really curious to understand, to know more about her, and she seems to be very close to all of us middle class individuals in India even today, and being a woman, she will talk only about that she has seen. So these are the things that I would generally say.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I think this point that you make about seeing is very important. It's reflected. And we must also kind of note that in her poetry, how when she is writing from the position of racial oppression, how seeing is very important. And so where her writing is making a case to actually see these people, and that is how people are generally ignored, people who are on the margins, outside the margins, they're people who are ignored. So it is through her writing that she's bringing them back and is in a sense compelling the reader to see, to acknowledge the presence
you
of
also
these
talked
people.
about painting. So
Yes.
seeing is painting actually.
Seeing
So
is painting.
the picture forms in one's retina,
Yes.
and then one represents it, reproduces it in the form of words.
Words. Yes.
So it's not like in Wordsworth, auditory imagination where the
No.
ear will be following the noises or the calmness, etc. that is surrounding, but she'll just see and write and
Absolutely.
write according to the logic of
No,
seeing.
in fact, in her poetry, I think the whole idea of observation, of seeing, and of, as I said, articulation in poetry, and to ensure that the people are seen, I think that is a very important intervention that Gwendolyn Brooks makes. So, if you look at this poem, The Bean Eaters, they eat beans mostly, this old yellow pair. So, old yellow pair refers probably to an elderly couple, but also to somebody who's probably in dire poverty. So, and beans is considered to be very ordinary food. So, they are just eating beans and eating it mostly. So, indicating that most of the time they eat beans. Dinner is a casual affair. So, there is there is no spread that one sees there, or some kind of very, she's
Big
deliberately
table and,
a big
full of
table.
table, yes.
Absolutely. So she's deliberately foregrounding that dinner is just a very
Quite
casual,
casual
normal
affair.
thing. And now let's look at the cutlery that is used, the so-called fineness of, the finesse that one sees in dinner is something that she challenges, and she's critical of it. So she says, here are people who are eating beans all the time. And to quote from the poem, plain chipware on a plain and creaking wood. So the plates in which they are eating, it's not just tableware, it's chipware, it's chipped on the sides. And the table on which they have kept these plates is plain and is creaking, the wood is creaking, and it's called tin flatware. So even the material of the plates is probably just very ordinary tin flatware. Two who are mostly good, two who have lived their day, but keep on putting on their clothes and putting things away. So it takes on, interestingly, from the cutlery that is being used, from the plates that are being used. So tin flatware, and then we move on to two who are mostly good. So who are these two? Are these two plates that are good, and there are two others who have lived their day? But this is probably a reference to the couple itself. Two who are generally very good, they have lived their day, which gives us the indication that this probably is an elderly couple, but keep on putting on their clothes and putting things away. So,
See the easy rhyming.
yes.
Yes, yes.
And also, like I'm of course reminded, pretty much of Eliot to wear a face to meet the faces, each day. So similarly over here, this couple probably, it's they change their clothes on a daily basis. So they've lived their day, but they're mostly good, and it's just very routine life that they are leading. But they also keep putting things away. And putting things away, are these objects that they put away, or are these thoughts? Because the next line is, and remembering. Remembering with twinklings and twinges. So there are reasons for twinkling, and then there are reasons for a twinge. So of course there's
Pain and
alliteration, there's
enjoyment.
lyrical, it's rhyming, but there's pain and there's joy. So remembering, so memory plays a very interesting role here, because at the, it's like sunset days, and so at that point of time, thinking about the life that one has led.
Memory of yesterday and memory of 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
When they were young.
When they were young. And so some thoughts bring joy, and some thoughts bring a lot of pain.
I'm also struck by the simplicity of the phrase, mostly good.
Mostly
So, would you like to explain?
Yes, so two who are mostly good, and as I said, it's very interestingly takes on from the tin flatware.
Yes, yes.
The plates that are chipped. So like the plates that are chipped, they have been in use for a long time, and this is not a couple that is going to have the wherewithal to throw it out and bring in some kind of fine plates or something. But at the same time, these two people, two who are mostly good, for the most, they are all right, they are living, they are existing.
Yes.
And they have lived their day, but they keep on putting on their clothes. So there is a sense of a kind of repetitive routine that is there, but also there is some effort in just following that routine. So on the whole they are good, but there might be days when they are not so good. So on the whole it's all right. It's a very stereotypical, conventional sort of life. And
that's the beauty of it.
Yes, that's
they,
the beauty.
they exist, they live, they enjoy, they are at peace with themselves. All
Absolutely.
these words, are squeezed into mostly good.
Yes, but at the same time, I think Brooks is also trying to draw attention to the fact that apart from, if we actually see that this is around 1960, so apart from the very hectic, industrialization, of course, has established itself completely almost a century back. So now, there are people leading very hectic lives, and, consumerism is high, people are accumulating things, But here there are two very simple people who are mostly good. They might have lived their day, but they are putting things away. But what are they bringing back? So they are putting some things away. What are they putting away? Maybe objects, maybe some thoughts that they don't want, but they're also remembering. So their existence is being defined also in terms of their memories, where each day they think about the life that they had led, of moments of joy and moments of pain. So, interestingly, the last lines are almost like in prose. As they lean over the beans in fact, I'll repeat this, and remembering with twinklings and twinges, as they lean over the beans in their rented back room that is full of beads and recipes and dolls and cloths, tobacco crumbs, vases and fringes.
Now see,
So
the entire crowd
it's
of
the
things,
paraphernalia.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a complete paraphernalia of this couple's life.
It is like a painting, as you
like a
said in the
painting.
beginning. Yes.
So they lean over the beans in a, so they don't, this couple.
It's a video. It's a kind of a video also. That they lean, then they eat, and then they look around, and they are happy, and they want to be happy, and they want to remember. All those things are there.
Yes, there's so much of movement in that sense in this particular poem, and how it is a rented back room. It's not just a back room. So here is a couple that's now moved to the other end of their life, and they have not been able to own a place. They are still living in a rented back room,
Yes.
and it says so much about industrialization, a world where the disparity is so high. And so here is a couple in a rented back room full of beads. The beads are probably the colorful aspects of their life, but their life is probably gone in paying up receipts that they have accumulated. So, how life is measured in terms of beads and receipts, twinklings and twinges. Dolls and cloths. So, the dolls are very interesting, and of course, if we just enter this poem through the word dolls, it can take us to multiple places, from, possibly children they might have had, possibly just dolls that they might have, from their own childhood still kept with them, or cloth. So, but it is some kind of a fondness that is there. And then there are tobacco crumbs, there are vases, and there are fringes. And it is on this note that the poem ends. It doesn't in that sense take us anywhere in sense of a finale, but it leaves us with the understanding that here are these people leading a very simple life, and people who have spent their entire life. And like you said, that this poem speaks so much to even the middle class reader in India about how life is an accumulation of so many of these things, of beads, receipts, dolls, cloths, crumbs, tobacco crumbs, or maybe something else, and vases and fringes. So this is what the couple that we started
the ordinariness
with, the
of
old
life.
yellow pair,
Yes.
the ordinariness of life. And the use of the word yellow is very significant, and it's not as if Brooks moves too much into color. It's only right at the
What
beginning.
does yellow signify? Does it signify kind of yellow, the Spanish people and all? The people
No,
without,
I think it's just
not Chinese, I think, in any case.
No, certainly not. But I think the yellow here is more the paleness of life, and how they are a couple that is towards the in a sense the yellow phase of their life, and things also turn yellow as they grow old. So it is that kind of an indication that Brooks is giving us. So now it is this kind of input in terms of writing poetry that Brooks makes, where there is very keen observation about people around her, and these are the lives of the blacks. These are the lives of people of color. They are the ones that she sees around, and she makes sure that poetry reflects and foregrounds these lives. And these are lives that certainly the dominant hegemonic voices would probably have ignored. And so she uses poetry to foreground these voices.
And also she has selected the ordinary landscape, but the selection is so conscious that the thing must have been different also around this landscape. Outside the rented house, there might be sprawling places where people enjoy and show off and all those things. But they are stuck to a corner and they are enjoying themselves there as well.
Yes, and it's interesting. It's not a place they own. It's rented, and it's a back room. It's not a room that's there in the front. It's not even a house in that sense. It's just a back room. And like you said, and I think the classic example of this kind of difference and disparity would be the dinner itself, a casual affair. And still, both of them poring over the beans and looking at the paraphernalia that they have accumulated is very, very interesting. And of course, there's such compassion, such empathy that is there in this poem that it does reach out, in a sense, to the reader.
So friends, in the first part of the lecture, Professor Payal Nagpal has touched upon the ordinary details of life through the poet that she has chosen to represent here. And the poet appears to be happy, but at the same time raising difficult questions by the understatement. The statement is not overtly critical, but it's not very complacent either. And she doesn't refer to enjoyment of the poet, but she definitely refers to the acceptance of things as they are. So it's a different kind of poetry, appears very simple on the surface, but I believe under the surface, beneath the surface, there is a lot of complexity that Professor Payal Nagpal will reveal to us in the second part of the lecture. And there is a kind of existence of the black people and particularly black women, and that's the perspective that is given to us, that in that phase, people learn the trick to survive. There is a strategy to survive, but at the same time, that survival does not put them to sleep. It keeps them awake, it keeps them aware about things that are happening even beyond what they see and observe. So that's what it is, and I'm sure that already Professor Payal Nagpal would have made you curious about the other poems that she would have written and the kind of expansion that would have given to her imagination in her poetic effort. Thank you.